There are moments in a wolf's life when silence cuts deeper than any blade. When Alpha King Rowan stood before his mate and told her she would share him with another woman for the sake of bloodlines and politics, Celine Ashridge did not scream. She did not beg. She simply removed the silver lunar ring from her finger and walked out of the palace while the entire kingdom watched. That was the day an empire learned that some wolves cannot be caged by crowns. If you want to see how a rejected Luna builds her own kingdom from ash and fury, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I know my pack is watching. The throne room stank of old power and older lies. Celine stood 3 paces from the dais where Rowan sat draped in ceremonial furs that made him look like something carved from stone and winter. Around them, the hall pressed in with bodies. Alphas from every corner of the continent, elders whose bones remembered wars Celine had only heard about in stories. Betas positioned along the walls with hands resting on sword hilts, ready for violence that everyone pretended would never come. She could feel their eyes on her skin like brands. The air tasted metallic. Incense burned in braziers mounted on iron pillars, but underneath that perfume ran something sour. Sweat. Fear. The particular stench of wolves who knew they were watching something break but could not look away. Rowan's voice came down from the throne like a judgment. You know what this kingdom requires of you. Celine did not move. She had learned stillness the way other wolves learned to hunt. Her hands hung loose at her sides. Her spine remained straight. She wore the ceremonial gown they had dressed her in that morning, deep crimson silk that pooled around her feet like spilled blood, and she hated every thread of it. I know what you require, she said. Her voice carried through the hall without effort. Not loud, just clear. I also know what I will not do. A ripple moved through the gathered wolves. Whispers hissed between teeth. An elder near the front, a gray-muzzled man whose name she had never bothered to learn, shifted his weight and frowned. Rowan leaned forward. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words too sharp to spit out. The crown sat heavy on his dark hair, gold and iron twisted together in a design that predated his bloodline by centuries. He looked tired. She had not noticed that before. Or maybe she had stopped caring when he stopped defending her. Celine, he said, and this time his tone softened just enough to remind her of the man she once believed he was. This is not about what we want. This is about survival. The northern packs are fracturing. The eastern territories refuse our treaties. If we do not solidify the bloodline now, if we do not show strength through alliance, through sharing you, she cut in, through making me stand beside another woman and pretend it does not gut me, through asking me to smile while you bed someone else for politics. Silence dropped like a stone into water. Rowan's knuckles whitened where they gripped the armrests of the throne. His eyes, pale gray and wolf-bright, locked onto hers with an intensity that might have moved her once. Now it only made her colder. It is temporary, he said. No. Celine took one step forward, just one. It is permanent. The moment you let them put another Luna beside me, you tell every wolf in this kingdom that I am replaceable, that loyalty can be negotiated, that love is a resource you can ration when it suits your crown. One of the alphas in the crowd, a broad-shouldered man with scars running down his neck, let out a low rumble of approval before catching himself. Another elder hissed something too quiet for Celine to hear, but the tone carried. Disapproval. Disgust. These men did not like it when a Luna spoke as if she had the right to refuse. Rowan stood. The movement sent a wave of tension through the room. Wolves straightened, hands twitched toward weapons. He descended the steps slowly, each footfall deliberate, until he stood level with her. Up close, she could see the lines carved into his face by sleepless nights, could smell the pine and iron scent of him, familiar as her own heartbeat. Once that scent had meant safety. Now it just smelled like betrayal dressed in duty. I do not want this, he said quietly. You think I want to stand here and ask you to break yourself for a crown I never even wanted? But I am king, Celine. I do not get to choose what I want. Then you are not the man I mated. His expression cracked. Just for a second. Long enough for her to see the raw hurt underneath before he buried it again behind that stone mask. If you walk away from this, he said, you walk away from everything. Your title, your place in this court, your future as Luna. Do you understand that? Celine felt something settle inside her chest, a certainty she had been circling for months without naming. It felt like relief, like the moment before a storm breaks and the air finally moves again. "I understand," she said. Then she reached up and pulled the silver ring from her finger. It was a small thing, delicate. 3 interlocking bands that represented the bond between mate, pack, and throne. She had worn it since the day Rowan claimed her in front of the old council, back when she still believed that love could survive power. The ring caught the torchlight as she turned toward the throne. Every wolf in the hall stopped breathing. Celine walked past Rowan without looking at him. She climbed the steps to the dais, her gown dragging behind her like a wound. When she reached the throne, she placed the ring on the seat with the kind of care someone might use when laying a body to rest. Then she turned to face the room. "I am done," she said. Her voice did not shake. It did not rise. It simply existed, and that was enough. No wolf spoke. No wolf moved. They all stood frozen in a moment that would be retold for generations, though none of them knew it yet. Celine walked down the steps, past Rowan, who stood with his fists clenched and his jaw locked, past the elders who watched her with expressions ranging from shock to contempt, past the alphas who had come to witness Aluna's submission and instead saw her refusal. She walked the length of that hall alone. No one stopped her. No one dared. The great doors stood open at the far end, spilling late afternoon light across the stone floor. She moved toward it like a woman walking toward her own execution, except she was not dying. She was shedding a skin that had never fit. Behind her, someone started to speak. An elder, maybe. Or one of Rowan's advisors. She did not turn to see. The light hit her face as she crossed the threshold. Cold autumn air filled her lungs. Beyond the palace walls, the capital city sprawled down the hillside in a tangle of wood and stone, smoke rising from 1,000 chimneys. She had lived here for 3 years, had walked these streets as Luna, had believed this place could be home. It never was. She kept walking. The guards at the outer gate stared as she passed, but no one raised a hand to stop her. Word had already spread. The Luna had refused the king. The Luna had walked away. By the time the sun touched the horizon, Celine Ashridge was gone. The first night, she walked until her feet bled inside her ceremonial shoes. The silk gown was useless in the wilderness. It caught on branches and soaked through with dew. She tore the hem at knee height with her bare hands and kept moving north, away from the roads, away from the territories where Rowan's name still carried weight. Her wolf howled inside her chest, confused and grieving. Wolves were not meant to be alone. The bond between mates pulled at her like a fishhook lodged beneath her ribs, and every step away from Rowan made it worse. But she did not stop. She found shelter in a cave as the moon rose, a shallow depression in a hillside that stank of old animal musk. She curled up on the bare stone and shook with cold and fury until exhaustion dragged her under. In her dreams, she stood in the throne room again. But this time, when she placed the ring on the seat, Rowan lunged forward and grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron. His eyes were desperate. "Do not do this," he said. And she woke up with tears on her face and the taste of ash in her mouth. By the third day, other wolves started to appear. She had crossed into the disputed northern lands, the buffer zone between kingdoms where no alpha's law held absolute power. Rogues and exiles drifted through these forests like ghosts, surviving on scraps and caution. Celine was crouched by a stream, washing blood from a rabbit she had caught, when she felt them watching. She did not look up, just kept working, her hand steady even though her heart kicked against her ribs. "You are far from the palace, Luna." The voice came from the tree line. Male, rough-edged with disuse. Celine finished rinsing the rabbit and stood slowly, turning to face the speaker. He was older than her by a decade, maybe more. Lean and scarred, with eyes that had seen too much and trusted nothing. 2 other wolves flanked him, a woman with a shaved head and a younger man whose left arm ended at the elbow. "I am not Luna anymore," Celine said. The older wolf studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was a bitter thing. "Good," he said. "That title is poison anyway." His name was Kael. The woman was Imara. The young man was simply called Ash because he had been found half-burned in a raided village and could not remember his real name. They had been exiled for different reasons. Kael had challenged an alpha and lost. Imara had refused a mating bond her pack tried to force. Ash had survived something his packmates did not, and they blamed him for their deaths. "We heard what you did," Imara said that night as they sat around a small fire. "Heard you walked out in front of everyone." "Word travels fast," Celine said. Kale grunted. "It does when a Luna tells a king to go to hell." Celine poked at the fire with a stick. "I did not tell him anything. I just left." "Same thing," Ash said quietly. He was gnawing on a piece of dried meat, his teeth working at it with the patience of someone used to making meals last. To them, leaving is worse than fighting. It means you do not think they are worth the effort. Celine looked at him. Ash met her gaze without flinching. His eyes were old in a young face. "Are you planning to go back?" Kale asked. "No." "Then what are you planning?" Celine opened her mouth to answer and realized she had no idea. She had not thought past the act of leaving, had not planned for survival, for purpose, for the long stretch of years ahead without the structure she had lived inside since childhood. "I do not know," she said. Imara laughed, short and sharp. "Well, you better figure it out. Winter is coming, and these woods do not forgive wolves who hesitate." Well, they traveled together after that. Not a pack, exactly. More like debris washed up on the same shore, clinging to each other because the alternative was drowning alone. Celine learned to hunt without the advantage of a pack bond, learned to sleep light and wake fast, learned the language of wolves who had been abandoned by the world and refused to die quietly. Other exiles found them. A mother with 2 pups whose mate had cast them out for failing to bear a male heir. An elder whose pack had left him behind when age slowed his legs. A young beta who had been caught loving another male and beaten until his ribs showed through his skin. They came because they had nowhere else to go. And they stayed because Celine did not turn them away. One night, as the group huddled around a fire larger than they should have risked, Kael looked at her across the flames. "You know what you're building here," he said. Celine shook her head. "You are building something they will fear," he said. "Because you are proving that rejected wolves do not need their permission to survive." She thought about that, about the faces around the fire, about the way these broken wolves had started to move like a unit, watching each other's backs, sharing food even when there was not enough. "I am not building anything," she said. "I am just trying to keep us alive through winter." Kael smiled. "That is how all kingdoms start." The valley appeared like a gift in late autumn, nestled between 2 ridges where a river cut through stone older than memory. It was defensible, sheltered from the worst winds, rich with game and timber. And most importantly, it sat in the dead center of the disputed lands, where no alpha would think to look for a band of exiles building something permanent. Celine stood on the high ground and looked down at the water glinting in the afternoon light. "This could work," Imara said beside her. "It could get us killed," Kael countered. "If we start building here, if we claim this land, every alpha with ambition is going to take it as a challenge." "Then let them come," Celine said. Both wolves turned to stare at her. She looked at Kael. "You said I was building something. You were right. But if we are going to do this, we do it properly. No more hiding, no more apologizing for surviving. We build a place where wolves like us do not have to beg for scraps from kings who see us as disposable." Imara's expression shifted. Something fierce and hungry moved behind her eyes. "You are talking about a sanctuary," she said. "I'm talking about a kingdom," Celine said. "One that does not measure worth by bloodlines or politics. One that chooses loyalty over power." Kael was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "Silver Hollow," he said. "What?" "The name. This place. Silver Hollow. For the Luna who walked away from silver and found something stronger." Celine looked down at the valley again, at the river that would give them water, at the trees that would give them shelter, at the stone that would give them walls. "Silver Hollow," she repeated, and the kingdom began. The first winter nearly killed them. They had shelter, barely. Rough structures built from logs and mud that leaked when it rained and let in the cold when the wind turned vicious. Food was scarce. Hunting took too much energy and returned too little meat. 2 of the pups died in their sleep, and they buried them on the ridge where the sun rose first. Celine stopped sleeping. She spent her nights walking the perimeter, making sure no predators had caught their scent, making sure the fires stayed lit, making sure the wolves who looked to her for leadership did not wake up to find her frozen in doubt. Her wolf was barely there anymore. The bond with Rowan had stretched so thin it felt like scar tissue, a numb ache that never quite faded. She could feel him sometimes, distant as a star, and she hated that she still felt anything at all. In the darkest part of winter, Kael found her sitting alone on a boulder overlooking the valley. "You're going to kill yourself," he said. "Maybe." He sat down beside her. They did not speak for a while. The night was so cold their breath hung in the air like smoke. "I have seen a lot of leaders," Kael said eventually. "Alphas who ruled through fear. Alphas who ruled through strength. Alphas who thought power meant never showing weakness. You know what they all had in common?" Celine shook her head. "They all died alone," he said, "because they forgot that a pack is not a throne. It is a bond. And bonds require something crowns do not." "What?" "Trust," he said. "You have to let us carry some of this weight, Celine, or you're going to break before spring." She looked at him, at this wolf who had been discarded and scarred and left for dead, who still somehow believed there was value in building something together. "I do not know how to do that," she said quietly. Kael shrugged. "Neither do any of us. But we will figure it out, or we will die trying. Either way, you do not have to do it alone." Something inside her cracked. Not breaking, just shifting, like ice that is held too long through winter finally giving way to the thaw underneath. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he repeated. They sat there until dawn, two wolves keeping watch over a kingdom that did not exist yet, except in the stubborn refusal to disappear. Spring came late, but it came. The valley turned green, the river swelled with snowmelt, and the wolves of Silver Hollow began to build in earnest. More exiles arrived. Word had spread through the underground network of rogues and outcasts that there was a place in the north where rejected wolves could find shelter. They came in twos and threes, cautious and half feral, expecting traps or cruelty or demands for submission. What they found instead was Celine standing at the entrance to the valley with her hands empty and her eyes steady. "No one rules here through fear," she told them. "No one is disposable. If you stay, you work. You contribute. You defend this place and the wolves in it. That is the only law." Some left immediately. They did not trust kindness. It smelled like a trap. But most stayed. They built homes. Real ones, with stone foundations and timber frames and roofs that did not collapse under heavy snow. They dug wells and planted gardens and constructed a hall at the center of the valley where everyone could gather without fear of judgment or violence. Celine did not call herself Luna. She had no title. But when disputes arose, wolves brought them to her. When decisions needed to be made, they waited for her word. Not because she demanded it, because she had earned it. And slowly, Silver Hollow stopped being a refuge for the broken. It became something stronger. 2 years after she walked out of Rowan's palace, Celine stood in the center of the great hall and looked at the faces gathered around her. There were over 200 wolves now, warriors and healers, builders and hunters, wolves who had been thrown away by kingdoms that valued bloodlines over loyalty, who had found each other in the cold and decided to survive together. Imara stood at her right hand, scarred and fierce. Kael, at her left, steady as stone. Ash had grown into his strength, and now he led the scouts who kept watch on the borders. The elder whose pack had abandoned him now taught the young ones how to track and fight and survive. This was a pack, a real one, built not on submission, but on choice. "We need to talk about what comes next," Imara said quietly. Celine nodded. She had been avoiding this conversation, but she could not avoid it forever. "The other alphas are watching us," Kael said. "They have been for months. Silver Hollow is too strong now to ignore, too prosperous. Wolves are leaving their territories to come here, and that makes us a threat." "So what do they want?" Celine asked. "War," Kael said flatly. "They want to crush us before we become unstoppable. Can we win? If we fight smart, maybe. If we fight alone, no." Celine looked around the hall, at the wolves who had trusted her with their lives, who had believed her when she said there was another way to live. "Then we do not fight alone," she said. "We find allies. We build treaties. We show them that Silver Hollow is not a threat to their kingdoms. We are an alternative. Imara frowned. You think they will accept that? No, Celine said, but I think some of their wolves will, and that is how we win. The message arrived on a cold morning in early autumn. A lone wolf approached the valley under a white flag, carrying a sealed letter marked with the royal crest of Moonfang. Rowan's crest. Celine took the letter from the messenger and dismissed him without opening it. She stood alone in her small house, staring at the wax seal, feeling the ghost of the bond she had severed twist inside her chest like a knife. When she finally broke the seal and unfolded the paper, the words were brief. War is coming. You cannot stop it, but you do not have to face it alone. Come home. Celine read it 3 times. Then she walked to the fireplace and held the edge of the paper to the flames. The letter caught quickly. She watched it burn until there was nothing left but ash. Then she turned toward the door, where Kael was waiting with his arms crossed and his expression grim. They are moving, he said. I know. What do you want to do? Celine looked past him, toward the valley where her wolves were training and building and living without fear. We prepare, she said. And when they come, we show them what wolves built on loyalty can do. Kael nodded slowly. Then let us make sure they remember why they should have left us alone. And in the distance, beyond the ridges, an army began to march towards Silver Hollow, with conquest in their hearts and no idea what they were about to face. The army arrived at dawn when the mist still clung to the valley floor like a shroud. Celine stood on the ridge above Silver Hollow and watched them come. Hundreds of wolves moving in formation, their armor catching the first light. Banners snapped in the wind, each one bearing the mark of a different pack. This was not just one kingdom's assault. This was a coalition. They want to make an example of us, Kael said beside her. His voice was flat, matter of fact. He had seen this before. Then we make sure the example they set is not the one they intended, Celine replied. Below, her wolves moved into position. 2 years of training had turned refugees into soldiers. They knew the terrain, knew every choke point and killing ground in the valley, knew that survival was not about fighting fair. It was about fighting smart. Imara appeared at her other side, breathing hard from the climb. Scouts report 3 separate columns converging on the main pass. They are trying to box us in. Let them try, Celine said. We are not going anywhere. She felt it then. That pull in her chest she had learned to ignore. The mate bond stretching thin but never quite breaking. Rowan was down there somewhere, leading this army or riding with it. She did not know which, and she told herself it did not matter. But her wolf knew it was a lie. The first horn sounded across the valley, deep and resonant, a challenge that demanded answer. Celine raised her hand. Around her, wolves lifted their own horns and blew a response that echoed off the stone ridges like thunder. Then she shifted. The transformation ripped through her fast and clean, bones realigning, muscle and fur replacing skin. Her wolf was silver white, larger than most females, with eyes that burned gold in the rising sun. She threw back her head and howled, and every wolf in Silver Hollow answered. The sound rolled across the valley like a living thing, primal, defiant, a declaration that said we are here and we will not be moved. The army below hesitated, just for a moment, long enough for Celine to see doubt ripple through their ranks. Then they charged. The first wave hit the outer defenses like a fist against stone. Silver Hollow's warriors had spent months fortifying the valley, trenches lined with sharpened stakes, walls of earth and timber that turned the open ground into a maze, archers positioned on the high ground with enough arrows to blot out the sun. The attacking wolves poured into the kill zone and died by the dozens. Celine moved through the chaos with her pack at her back. She did not lead from safety. She led from the front, her teeth finding throats, her claws opening bellies. Around her, wolves fought with the desperation of animals who knew there was nowhere left to run. An alpha broke through the line, massive and scarred, swinging a war axe that split shields like kindling. He roared a challenge, and 3 of Celine's wolves went down under his assault. She hit him from the side. They went down together in a tangle of fur and fury. He was stronger, heavier, but she was faster, and she had spent 2 years learning how to kill wolves who thought size mattered more than skill. Her jaws closed around his throat. She felt his pulse hammering against her teeth. felt the exact moment he realized he was going to die. She ripped his throat out and moved on. The battle raged for hours. The sun climbed higher and the ground turned to mud under the weight of blood and bodies. Celine lost track of time, lost track of everything except the rhythm of violence. Strike, dodge, kill, survive. A horn sounded retreat and the attacking army pulled back, dragging their wounded with them. Celine stood in the center of the battlefield, panting, her fur matted with gore that was not all hers. Around her, Silver Hollow's wolves regrouped. They had held. Barely. But they had held. Kyle limped toward her, shifted back to human form. His left side was soaked with blood. "That was just the first wave," he said. "They were testing us." "I know. How many did we lose?" Kyle's expression went dark. 17 dead, 23 wounded badly enough they cannot fight. Celine felt each number like a blade. These were her wolves, her responsibility. She had brought them here, had promised them a place where they would be safe, and now they were dying to defend it. "Get the wounded to the healers," she said. "Reinforce the eastern wall. They will hit us there next." Kale nodded and moved off, shouting orders. Celine shifted back to human form and stood naked in the mud and blood, feeling the weight of what she had built pressing down on her shoulders. She had wanted to create a sanctuary. Instead, she had created a target, but she would be damned if she let them take it. The second assault came at midday, and this time they were ready for the defenses. The attacking army sent rams forward, massive logs carried by dozens of wolves, designed to smash through the walls. Behind them came ladders and grappling hooks. They were not testing anymore. They were coming for blood. Celine met them at the breach. She had armored herself in leather and steel, her hair braided back, a sword in each hand. Around her, Silver Hollow's best fighters formed a wall of flesh and fury that refused to break. The rams hit the eastern wall and timber exploded. Wolves poured through the gap like water through a cracked dam. "Hold the line!" Celine roared. Her wolves slammed into the invaders with everything they had. The fighting was brutal, close quarters, no room for tactics or strategy, just raw violence measured in heartbeats and severed limbs. Celine carved through the press of bodies, her blades singing. She had learned to fight from the best warriors in Moonfang's court, back when she still believed that crown meant something. Now she used those lessons to kill wolves who served kings exactly like the one she had walked away from. A beta caught her blade on his shield and drove forward, trying to overwhelm her with strength. She dropped low, slid past his guard, and opened his femoral artery with a precision cut that came from 2 years of surviving fights she should have lost. He went down screaming. She kept moving. Somewhere in the chaos, she heard Amara's voice raised in a war cry, heard Ash shouting orders to the archers, heard Kyle's steady commands holding the northern flank together. They were not just surviving anymore, they were winning. The realization hit her like lightning. These rejected wolves, these throwaways and outcasts, were beating an army made up of the best warriors the kingdoms could field. And then she felt him. Rowan. The mate bond flared to life like an ember suddenly exposed to air. He was close. Too close. Moving through the battlefield with the kind of lethal grace that had made him Alpha King before he was 25. Celine's wolf surged inside her, confused and furious. Part of her wanted to run to him. Part of her wanted to rip his throat out for bringing war to her doorstep. She shoved both impulses down and kept fighting, but she could not stop herself from looking, from scanning the press of bodies until she found him. He stood 30 yards away, cutting through her wolves with a sword that looked like it weighed more than some men. His armor was blackened steel chased with gold. His face was a mask of controlled violence, and his eyes found hers across the carnage. Everything stopped. Not literally. The battle still raged around them. Wolves still died screaming. But in that moment, the only thing that existed was the space between them and the weight of everything unsaid. Rowan's expression cracked. Just for a second. Long enough for her to see something that might have been regret or longing or grief. Then an enemy wolf slammed into her from the side, and the moment shattered. Tuts. By the time the sun touched the western ridge, both armies were bleeding. The attacking force pulled back again, retreating to the far end of the valley to regroup. Celine's wolves collapsed where they stood, too exhausted to celebrate the fact that they were still alive. Celine walked the battlefield, checking on her wounded, her boots squelching in mud that was more blood than earth. Every face she passed was a wolf she knew. Wolves who had trusted her, who had believed her when she said they could build something better. Some of them would not see morning. She found Ash sitting against a broken wall, holding pressure on a gut wound that looked bad. His face was gray. "You need a healer," she said. He shook his head. "Save them for wolves who have a chance. You have a chance." "No," he said quietly. "I do not. But that is all right. I got to see it, Celine, got to see what we built. That is more than I thought I would ever have." She knelt beside him and took his hand. His fingers were cold. "You are not going to die," she lied. He smiled. It was a terrible thing, sad and knowing and at peace. "Make sure it was worth it," he said. "Whatever happens next, make sure we did not die for nothing." Then his eyes went distant and his hand went slack in hers. Celine sat there for a long time, holding the hand of a wolf who had survived a burning village only to die defending the home she had promised would be safe. When she finally stood, something inside her had calcified into something harder than stone. The parley request came at dusk. A single wolf approached under a white flag, requesting that Celine meet with the army's commanders to discuss terms. She almost refused, almost sent the messenger back with her answer written in blood. But Kael talked her down. "We need to know what they want," he said. "Need to know if there is a way to end this without losing everyone." "There is no way to end this," Celine said. "They want us gone, dead or scattered. It does not matter which." "Then at least make them say it to your face," Amara cut in. "Make them own what they are doing here." So Celine agreed. She walked out alone into the no man's land between the armies, her sword belted at her side, her armor still stained with the blood of wolves who had died trying to take her kingdom. 3 figures waited for her in the fading light. 2 alphas she recognized from the old courts. Hard men with harder eyes who believed power was something you took and kept through violence. And Rowan. He stood in the center, his crown absent, his armor dented and scarred from the day's fighting. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into his face, could see the way his eyes tracked over her, checking for wounds, for damage, for proof that she was still alive. She hated that part of her, wanted to do the same. "Selene," he said. His voice was rough, raw in a way she had never heard before. "Alpha King," she replied. Cold, formal, putting distance between them with words since she could not trust herself to maintain it any other way. One of the other alphas stepped forward, a thick-necked man with a scar running from temple to jaw. "You cannot win this," he said. "You know that. We have 3 times your numbers, 4 times your resources. This ends with Silver Hollow in ashes unless you surrender now." Celine did not look at him. She kept her eyes on Rowan. "Is that what you came to tell me? That I should kneel? That I should abandon every wolf who trusted me and beg for mercy from men who see us as disposable?" "We are offering terms," the second alpha said. "Reasonable terms. Disband Silver Hollow. Return to your original packs. Submit to proper authority. No one else has to die." Celine laughed. It was a bitter sound, harsh as breaking glass. "Proper authority," she repeated. "You mean the same authority that cast us out, that beat us and exiled us and left us to die? That authority." "You are building a kingdom on stolen land," the first alpha snarled, "filling it with rogues and criminals. You think that will stand?" "It already has," Celine said, "for 2 years. And it will keep standing long after you and your armies are dust." Rowan finally spoke. His voice cut through the rising tension like a blade. "Enough." Both alphas fell silent. Rowan stepped forward, close enough that Celine could smell the iron and pine scent of him. Close enough that her wolf whined in her chest, desperate and confused. "I did not come here to threaten you," he said quietly. "I came here to offer you a way out." "There is no way out," Celine said. "You brought an army to my door. You spilled blood on my land. There is no walking that back." "I know," Rowan said, and his eyes held something raw and desperate that made her want to look away. "I know I failed you. Know I chose duty over everything that mattered. But this, Celine, this war, it is not about us anymore. It is about every alpha who sees Silver Hollow as a threat to the old order. They will not stop. Even if you win today, they will come back, again and again until nothing is left. So what are you asking me to do? Surrender? Abandon everything I built?" "I am asking you to come home," Rowan said. Not as a conquered Luna, as an equal. Help me change the system from inside. Together we can... No. The word came out flat. Final. She had heard these promises before, had believed them once. Rowan's jaw tightened. You would rather die than accept help from me. I would rather die than go back to being something I am not, Celine said. I walked away from you because you made me choose between your crown and my dignity. And now you show up with an army and ask me to make the same choice again. It is not the same. It is exactly the same, she said, just wrapped in prettier words. Rowan stared at her for a long moment. Then something in his expression shifted, hardened. If you do not surrender, he said slowly, I cannot stop what happens next. The Coalition wants Silver Hollow destroyed. They want every wolf here executed as an example. I have been holding them back. But if you refuse terms, then stop holding them back, Celine said. Let them come. Let them throw everything they have at us. Because when the dust settles and the bodies are counted, the world is going to remember that a pack of rejected wolves made 3 kingdoms bleed for every inch of ground. You are going to get them all killed, the scarred alpha growled. Maybe, Celine said, but at least they will die free. She turned and walked away without waiting for dismissal. Behind her, she heard the alphas arguing, heard Rowan's voice raised in something that might have been fury or despair. She did not look back. When she reached her own lines, Kael was waiting. How bad? He asked. As bad as it gets, she said. They attack at dawn. Full force. Everything they have. Can we hold? Celine looked at him. At this wolf who had followed her into the wilderness and helped her build a kingdom out of nothing, who had stood beside her when the world told them both they were worthless. I do not know, she said, but we are going to try. That night, Celine walked through Silver Hollow one last time. The valley was quiet. Her wolves tended their wounds and sharpened their weapons and tried not to think about the morning. Some prayed to old gods whose names had been forgotten. Some wrote letters they knew would never be delivered. Some just sat in silence, holding each other, grateful for one more night of being alive. Celine found Imara on the wall, staring out at the enemy campfires that dotted the far ridge like stars. You should be resting, Imara said without turning. So should you. Imara smiled. We will have plenty of time to rest when we are dead. Celine joined her at the rampart. They stood shoulder to shoulder, 2 wolves who had been thrown away by the world and refused to disappear. Do you regret it? Celine asked. Coming here, building this, knowing how it might end. Imara was quiet for a long time. Then she shook her head. My old pack forced me to choose between my freedom and their approval, she said. I chose freedom. And for 2 years, I got to live in a place where that choice was respected, where I was not just a body to be traded or a womb to be used. I got to be a person. So no, I do not regret it. Even if tomorrow we all die, I do not regret a single day. Celine felt something twist in her chest, something that might have been pride or grief or both tangled together. Thank you, she said. For what? For following me, Celine said. For believing me when I said we could build something better. For staying even when it got hard. Imara turned to look at her. Her eyes were fierce in the moonlight. You gave us a reason to stay, she said. You gave us something worth fighting for. That is not a small thing, Celine. That is everything. Mat. Dawn came too fast. Celine stood on the wall in full armor, her sword across her back, and watched the enemy army form up in the gray pre-dawn light. They had brought everything, siege engines, war machines, thousands of wolves ready to die for the promise of glory, or land, or whatever lie their alphas had told them. Silver Hollow's defenders lined the walls and filled the trenches. 200 wolves against 3,000. Mathematically, it was suicide. But math did not account for desperation. Did not account for wolves who had already lost everything once and refused to lose again. The enemy horn sounded. Celine raised her sword and the morning sun caught the blade, sending light flashing across the valley like a signal fire. Then she roared. It was not a command, not a war cry. It was something deeper, primal. The sound of a wolf who had been pushed too far and finally pushed back. Every wolf in Silver Hollow answered. The sound rolled across the valley like an avalanche, like the voice of something that could not be killed because it had already survived the unsurvivable. And then the army charged. They hit the defenses like a tidal wave. Siege engines hurled stones that smashed through walls, ladders slammed against the ramparts. Wolves poured into the breach in numbers too vast to count. Celine met them with steel and fury. She fought like something carved from violence itself. Every lesson she had ever learned, every scar she had ever earned, every moment of pain and loss and rage channeled into precision strikes that turned enemies into corpses. Around her, Silver Hollow's wolves fought with the kind of savagery that came from knowing there was no retreat, no surrender, only victory or death. The battle became a blur of blood and screaming and the wet sound of bodies hitting stone. Celine lost track of time, lost track of everything except the weight of her sword and the faces of wolves trying to kill her. She saw Kael go down under 3 attackers and fought her way to him, her blade opening throats. She dragged him back to the line and kept fighting. She saw Amara holding the breach with 6 wolves at her back, their shields locked together, refusing to give ground even as the enemy piled up in front of them. She saw her wolves dying, saw them falling, saw the kingdom she had built soaking into the mud one body at a time, and then she saw Rowan. He cut through the press of battle like a force of nature, his sword rising and falling in arcs of lethal precision. He was not leading the army anymore. He was fighting in it, beside his wolves instead of behind them. Their eyes met across 20 yards of carnage. For a single heartbeat, the world went still. Then a massive explosion rocked the valley. One of the siege engines had launched something that was not stone. Fire erupted along the eastern wall, spreading faster than water, consuming timber and flesh without discrimination. Celine's wolves screamed. She turned toward the flames and saw figures running, burning. Wolves who moments before had been alive and fighting, now reduced to torches that stumbled and fell and stopped moving. Something inside her snapped. She threw back her head and howled. Not a war cry this time. A command. The kind of absolute authority that came from 2 years of leading wolves who had no one else. Fall back to the inner keep. Now. Her wolves heard. Even through the chaos, they heard. They disengaged and ran, carrying their wounded, dragging their dead, moving toward the stone fortress at the heart of Silver Hollow. The enemy army surged forward, sensing victory. And then Rowan's voice cut through the battle. Cease fire. The command echoed across the valley. Sharp. Absolute. The voice of a king who expected obedience. The attacking army hesitated, slowed, stopped. Rowan strode forward into the no man's land between the armies, alone, unarmed, his sword planted point first in the ground. Enough, he roared. This ends now. The scarred alpha from the parley appeared at the edge of the battlefield, his face twisted with rage. What are you doing? We have them. 5 more minutes, and I said enough, Rowan snarled. He turned to face the coalition alphas, his voice carried across the valley. You wanted to make an example. You wanted to show what happens to wolves who defy the old order. Well, look at what it cost. Hundreds dead. For what? To prove that we can crush wolves who just wanted to survive? To show that power means destroying anything we cannot control? This was your war, one of the alphas shouted back. You brought us here. You said Silver Hollow was a threat. I was wrong, Rowan said. The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. Celine stood on the wall, frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. Rowan turned toward Silver Hollow, toward her. I was wrong, he repeated. About all of it. I thought the old ways were the only ways, thought bloodlines and tradition and power were what made a kingdom strong. But standing here, watching wolves die for the crime of wanting something better, I finally understand what you tried to tell me. He took a step forward. Strength is not in crowns or armies or forcing submission. It is in choosing to build something worth defending. And these wolves, he gestured to Silver Hollow, they built something worth defending, not through violence, not through conquest, through choice, through loyalty freely given instead of demanded. The coalition alphas stood silent. Rowan pulled his crown from his belt, the same gold and iron circle that had sat on his head for 10 years. Then he threw it on the ground. I will not be king of a system that destroys wolves for refusing to kneel, he said. I will not lead armies that measure strength by how much they can break. If that is what it means to rule, then I am done ruling. He turned back to Celine. You were right to walk away, he said, right to build something new, and I was a fool for not seeing it until now. The valley was so quiet, Celine could hear her own heartbeat. Then Kael's voice, rough and uncertain, came from behind her. What do we do? Celine stared at Rowan, at the man who had chosen duty over her once and just chose her over everything, at the king who threw away his crown because he finally understood what she had been trying to tell him for 3 years. Her wolf surged inside her. Not with longing this time, with something else, something that felt like vindication. She climbed down from the wall and walked across the battlefield alone. Rowan watched her come. His eyes never left hers. When she stood in front of him, close enough to touch, she finally spoke. If you think I am going to forgive you because you made a dramatic gesture in front of an army, you are insane. I know, he said. If you think I'm going to go back to being what I was, you are delusional. I know that too. So what exactly do you think this is? She asked. What do you think you are offering me? A chance, Rowan said. Not to go back. To move forward. Together. As equals. Not Luna and Alpha. Not subject and king. Just two wolves trying to build something better than what came before. Celine searched his face for any hint of deception. Any shadow of the man who had asked her to share him with another woman for politics? She found none. What she found instead was a man who had finally broken himself against the same walls she had shattered 3 years before, who had learned the same lesson she had learned when she walked away, that some things were not worth keeping if you had to lose yourself to hold them. The Coalition Alphas are not going to accept this, she said. They are not going to let you walk away. I know, Rowan said, which is why I need your help. Silver Hollow proved that another way is possible. Now we need to prove it can last. Celine looked past him at the armies still watching, at the Alphas who had spent decades building power on the backs of wolves they considered disposable, at the system she had walked away from and he had just walked away from. And she made a choice, not because she forgave him, not because the mate bond demanded it, but because she finally saw something in him that matched what she had become. A wolf who chose freedom over power. She held out her hand. Rowan stared at it for a long moment. Then he clasped her forearm in the traditional warrior's grip, and the valley erupted. Not with violence this time, with sound. Silver Hollow's wolves howled. Some of Rowan's soldiers joined them. The noise built and built until it shook the ground itself. But the Coalition Alphas did not howl. The scarred Alpha stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. You betray everything we stand for, he snarled at Rowan. Everything we built. You think you can just walk away? You think we will let you undermine centuries of tradition because you lost your spine? Rowan turned to face him. His voice was quiet, lethal. I think if you try to stop me, you are going to find out what it costs to fight wolves who have nothing left to lose. Both armies, united. The Alpha's hand dropped to his sword, and then Amara's voice cut through the tension. Stand down! She had moved forward without anyone noticing, a dozen of Silver Hollow's best warriors at her back. Kael appeared on the other side, favoring his wounded leg but moving with grim purpose. One by one, wolves from both sides stepped into the space between the armies, creating a wall, not of violence, of choice. The Coalition Alphas found themselves surrounded by wolves who had decided that the old ways were done. You can try to fight us, Celine said, but I think you will find that trying to kill wolves who already survived the unsurvivable is harder than you think. The scarred Alpha looked around, at his own wolves, some of whom were now standing with Silver Hollow's pack, at Rowan, who had thrown away a crown rather than serve a system he no longer believed in, at Celine, who had walked away from power and built something stronger. Then he spat on the ground and turned away. This is not over, he said. Maybe not, Celine replied. But today it is. The coalition forces withdrew. Slowly. Grudgingly. Dragging their dead and their wounded and their shattered certainty that power could crush anything that refused to kneel. By the time the sun reached its apex, the valley was quiet again. Celine stood among her wolves, exhausted and bloodied and still alive. Rowan stood beside her, no longer a king, but not quite something else yet either. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now, Celine said, we build something neither of us could have built alone. She looked across Silver Hollow. At the walls, they would have to rebuild. At the wounded, they would have to heal. At the system, they would have to tear down and remake from scratch. It was an impossible task. But then again, so was walking away from an Alpha King and surviving to tell the story. And if she had learned anything in 3 years of refusing to disappear, it was that impossible just meant no one had done it yet. The first month after the battle, Celine learned that building a new world was harder than tearing down the old one. Silver Hollow had survived, but barely. The walls were scarred with fire damage, and the smell of burned timber still clung to the valley when the wind shifted wrong. They buried 43 wolves on the ridge where the sun rose first, adding to the graves already there. Every stone they placed felt like a promise they might not be able to keep. Rowan stayed, not as a king, not even as an alpha in the traditional sense. He worked beside her wolves, clearing rubble and repairing walls, his hands blistering like everyone else's. Some of Silver Hollow's pack accepted him, most tolerated him. A few refused to acknowledge his existence at all, and Celine did not force them. Trust was something you earned with time and scars, not dramatic gestures. She stood now in what passed for a council chamber, a rough-hewn room carved into the hillside with a table made from salvaged timber. Around her sat the wolves who had become her inner circle. Kael, nursing a leg that would never fully heal. Imara, her face harder than it had been before the battle. 3 other pack leaders who represented the various factions within Silver Hollow. And Rowan, sitting at the far end of the table like a man who understood he was there on sufferance. "The reports are not good," Kael said. He spread a hand-drawn map across the table. "The coalition may have withdrawn, but they did not disband. They are consolidating, building alliances, and every wolf who deserted to join us makes them more determined to see Silver Hollow destroyed." "How long do we have?" Celine asked. "Months," Kael said. "Maybe less." "They're calling it a reckoning, saying that any alpha who allows his wolves to choose their own path is weak, that the old traditions exist for a reason. The old traditions exist to keep power in the hands of wolves who are afraid of losing it," Imara said flatly. "Agreed," Rowan said, "which is why we need to move faster than they expect." All eyes turned to him. He leaned forward, his fingers tracing lines on the map. "Silver Hollow cannot stand alone. Not long term. We need allies. Real ones. Packs who are tired of the coalition's stranglehold. Territories that have been crushed under the weight of tradition and are looking for another way." "You want to build an empire?" one of the other pack leaders said. Her name was Vera, a gray-furred wolf who had been eagled for refusing to execute her own son when he challenged an elder. "We did not come here to trade one tyrant for another." "Not an empire," Rowan said. "A federation. Independent territories united by choice instead of force. Each pack keeps its autonomy, makes its own laws. But when one of us is threatened, all of us respond." The room fell silent. Celine studied Rowan across the table. He looked different without the crown. Leaner, harder, like he had shed some weight that had been crushing him for years. But she could still see the strategist in him, the man who had been raised to think 3 moves ahead. "And you think other packs will accept this?" she asked. "You think they will trust 2 wolves who already broke away from their kingdoms once?" "No," Rowan said bluntly, "but I think they will trust results. Silver Hollow survived an assault by 3 coalition armies. That proves something. Now we need to show them it was not luck." "How?" Kael asked. "By hitting them first," Rowan said. The temperature in the room dropped. Imara's hand went to the blade at her belt. "You want to start a war." "We are already in a war," Rowan said. "We just have not admitted it yet. The coalition is regrouping, building strength. Every day we wait is a day they use to prepare. So we do not wait. We strike their weakest territories, offer those wolves the same choice we offered mine. Join us or watch their alphas bleed them dry for wars they do not believe in." "You're talking about invasion," Vera said. "Conquest." "I am talking about survival," Rowan shot back. "You think the coalition is going to leave Silver Hollow alone because we asked nicely? You think they are going to respect our borders because we built nice walls? They are coming. The only question is whether we are ready when they do." Celine felt the weight of every eye in the room shift to her. This was her decision, her kingdom. These wolves had followed her into the wilderness because she promised them a place where power did not mean domination. And now Rowan was asking her to become exactly what she had walked away from. "Give us the room," she said quietly. The pack leaders exchanged glances. Then they stood and filed out, leaving Celine alone with Rowan. The silence stretched between them like a blade. "You are asking me to compromise everything I built here," Celine said finally. "Everything Silver Hollow stands for. We do not conquer. We do not force submission. That is the whole point." "The point is survival," Rowan said. "And survival sometimes means making choices that do not fit neatly into the world you want to build. I learned that the hard way." "You think I wanted to ask you to share me with another woman? You think I wanted to watch you walk away? I did it because I thought it was the only way to keep the kingdom intact. I was wrong. But I was not wrong about the fact that sometimes the choice is between what you believe and what keeps your people alive." "Do not lecture me about hard choices," Celine said. Her voice was cold, lethal. "I made the hardest choice of my life when I walked away from you, when I chose dignity over power. Do not stand there and tell me I need to abandon that because you think war is inevitable. I'm not telling you to abandon anything," Rowan said. He stood and moved around the table. Celine's hand went to her knife, but he stopped just out of range. "I'm telling you that the coalition will not give you a choice. They're coming, Celine, and when they do, they will not leave survivors. So we can either wait for them to choose the time and place, or we can take the fight to them on our terms. And if we become monsters in the process, then at least we will be alive to regret it," Rowan said. Celine stared at him, at the man who had once been a king and was now something else, something harder. She wanted to hate him for being right, wanted to reject everything he was saying because it meant admitting that the world she had built was more fragile than she had believed. But she had not survived 3 years in the wilderness by lying to herself. "I will think about it," she said. Rowan nodded and turned to leave. "One more thing," Celine said. He paused at the door. "If we do this," she said, "if we take the fight to them, you do not lead. You advise. You strategize. But the wolves who risk their lives do it under my command, not yours. This is still my kingdom." Rowan's expression was unreadable. Then he inclined his head. "Understood," he said, and he walked out, leaving Celine alone with the weight of a decision that would define everything that came next. She gave the order 3 days later. They would strike the Western Territories first, a cluster of smaller packs ruled by an alpha named Gareth, who had a reputation for cruelty and a tendency to execute wolves who questioned his authority. Rowan's intelligence suggested that nearly half of Gareth's wolves were one bad winter away from open rebellion. Silver Hollow would give them the push they needed. The plan was simple, brutal. Celine hated every part of it. They would move at night, a strike force of 50 wolves led by Amara and Kael. Their target was not Gareth himself, but his supply lines, the grain stores that kept his territory fed, the armories that kept his soldiers armed. Burn them, and Gareth's control would crack like ice under pressure. Then Celine would offer his wolves sanctuary. It was manipulation dressed up as liberation, and she knew it. But Rowan had been right about one thing. The coalition was not going to give them time to build something perfect. So they would build something functional and hope they lived long enough to make it better. The strike force left on a moonless night. Celine watched them go from the ridge, her chest tight with something that felt like betrayal. She had promised these wolves a place where violence was not the answer to every problem. Now she was sending them to burn another pack's food and watch them starve. Kael paused before descending the ridge, his eyes meeting hers in the darkness. "We will make it quick," he said. "Minimal casualties." "That does not make it right," Celine said. "No," Kael agreed, "but it makes it necessary. And sometimes that is all we get." Then he was gone, and Celine was left alone with the taste of ash in her mouth. The reports came back 3 days later. The strike had been successful. Gareth's grain stores were cinders. His armory was rubble. And according to Amara's scouts, nearly 200 of his wolves had crossed into neutral territory, moving towards Silver Hollow. But something else had happened too. Celine stood in the council chamber with Amara and Rowan, staring at a message that had been delivered by a lone wolf under a black flag. "Gareth knows," Amara said. "Knows it was us. Knows it was planned, and he is not coming alone." "How many?" Celine asked. Amar's expression was grim. He called in markers. "Made deals. He is bringing 500 wolves, maybe more. And they are not coming to negotiate." Celine felt the world tilt. 500. Against Silver Hollow's 250, half of whom were still recovering from the last battle. "We cannot win that fight," she said quietly. Not head on, Rowan agreed. But we do not have to. We draw them into the valley, use the terrain, make them pay for every inch of ground until they break, or we do. And if we break first? Celine asked. Rowan did not answer. The silence stretched until Imara broke it. There is another problem, she said. Her voice was tight, controlled in the way that meant she was holding back fury. We lost contact with the northern outpost. 3 scouts. They were supposed to report this morning. Dead? Celine asked. Or captured, Imar said, which means Gareth might know our defensive positions, our supply routes, everything. Celine's hands curled into fists. This was spiraling. One strategic strike had turned into a full-scale war with an enemy who outnumbered them 2-1 and might already know how they planned to defend. Send word to the refugee wolves, she said. The ones fleeing Gareth's territory. Tell them we are still open, still offering sanctuary, but make it clear what they are walking into. You want them to fight, Rowan said. I want them to choose, Celine snapped. Same as everyone else. If they come here, they fight to defend it. If they do not, they find somewhere else. But I will not lie to them about what this place costs. Imara nodded and left. Celine turned to Rowan. This is exactly what I was afraid of. This is how it starts. One strike, one decision, and suddenly we are no different from the alphas we walked away from. We are different, Rowan said, because we are fighting to give wolves a choice. Gareth does not offer choices. He offers obedience or death. That distinction matters. Does it? Celine asked. Because from where I am standing, wolves are going to die either way, and I am the one sending them into the fire. Yes, Rowan said. He met her eyes without flinching. You are. That is what leadership is, Celine, making the calls that get people killed and living with it afterward. You think I slept easy when I sent armies to war? You think I did not see their faces every time I closed my eyes? But I did it anyway because the alternative was worse. Celine stared at him, at the shadows carved into his face by years of making exactly those calls. How do you live with it? She asked quietly. You do not, Rowan said. You just keep moving, keep building, keep trying to make sure their deaths meant something. And some days that is enough. Most days, it is not. Gareth's army arrived 4 days later, and they did not come quietly. They announced themselves with fire. The forest to the south went up in flames, smoke billowing into the sky like a declaration of war. Celine watched from the walls as the horizon turned orange and tried not to think about the animals dying in those woods. The small lives being consumed because 2 packs could not find a way to coexist. Kael appeared at her side, his face streaked with soot. Scouts report they are breaking into 3 columns, he said. 1 to the east, 1 to the west. The main force straight down the center. Classic pincer movement. They want to surround us, Celine said. They want to crush us, Kael corrected. Gareth is not interested in a siege. He is going for total annihilation. Then we make him regret it, Celine said. She turned to face the assembled wolves. Nearly 300 now, bolstered by the refugees from Gareth's territory who had chosen to stand and fight. They looked scared, exhausted. But they were here, and that had to count for something. You all know what is coming, Celine said. Her voice carried across the courtyard. You know the odds. You know that some of us will not see tomorrow, but you also know what we are fighting for. Not for conquest, not for power, for the right to choose our own fate, for the right to build something that does not demand we break ourselves to fit. She paused, letting the words settle. Gareth thinks he can burn us out, thinks numbers and fire are enough to destroy what we built. He is wrong. Because we are not just a pack. We are every wolf who was ever told they were disposable. Every wolf who walked away from power that demanded too much. And when he comes for us, we are going to show him what that means. The wolves howled, not with blind confidence, with the kind of grim determination that came from knowing you were probably going to die, but refusing to make it easy. Celine descended the wall and began moving through the ranks, checking weapons, offering quiet words of encouragement. She found Imara sharpening a blade that already looked sharp enough to split hairs. You ready? Celine asked. No, Imara said without looking up, but I will be when they get here. Celine moved on, found Rowan standing alone near the eastern gate, staring out at the smoke-stained sky. You should not be on the front line, she said. Rowan turned to face her. Neither should you, but we both know that is not how this works. Celine studied him. He had armored himself in battered steel that had seen too many battles. His sword was strapped across his back. He looked like what he was. A warrior who had spent his life fighting other people's wars and was finally fighting one that mattered. "If we die here," she said quietly, "I want you to know something." Rowan waited. "I still have not forgiven you," she said, "for what you asked me to do, for choosing duty over us. But I understand it now. Understand why you made the choice you did, and I am glad you are here, even if I wish the circumstances were different." Rowan's expression softened, just for a moment. "I do not deserve your forgiveness," he said, "but I will spend whatever time I have left earning it anyway." Then the horn sounded. Gareth's army had reached the valley. The first assault came at dusk, and it was everything Celine had feared. Gareth's wolves poured into the valley like a flood, overwhelming the outer defenses through sheer numbers. Silver Hollow's fighters fell back to prepared positions, making the enemy pay for every yard, but it was not enough. They were being pushed back. Slowly. Inevitably. Celine fought in the center of the line, her blade singing as she carved through wolves who kept coming, no matter how many fell. Blood soaked the ground. The air stank of iron and burned flesh. Somewhere to her left, she heard a wolf screaming. Then the eastern wall collapsed. Not from siege weapons, from explosives. The blast ripped through stone and timber, sending shrapnel and bodies flying. A massive hole opened in Silver Hollow's defenses, and Gareth's wolves poured through like water through a broken dam. "Fall back!" Celine roared. "Inner courtyard! Now!" Her wolves disengaged and ran. Some did not make it. She saw a young beta, barely old enough to have earned her claws, go down under 3 attackers. Saw an elder who had survived 2 exiles get his throat ripped out by a wolf half his age. She kept moving. The inner courtyard was smaller, more defensible, but it was also the last line. If they lost this, they lost everything. Silver Hollow's wolves formed a desperate shield wall, their bodies pressed together, weapons bristling outward. Gareth's army surrounded them, a sea of snarling faces and drawn steel, and then Gareth himself stepped forward. He was massive, easily the largest wolf Celine had ever seen, with scars that told the story of a life built on violence. He shifted to human form, standing naked and unconcerned in the center of the carnage. "Celine Ashridge," he said. His voice was a rumble, like stones grinding together. "The Luna who walked away. I have heard so much about you." Celine did not respond, just kept her blades ready. Gareth smiled. "It was a terrible thing. You built something impressive here," he said. "I will give you that. But you made a mistake. You thought you could burn my supplies and I would just roll over. Let my wolves abandon me for your pretty words about choice and freedom." He took a step closer. "Power is not about what you offer," he said. "It is about what you take. And I am going to take everything you built. Every stone, every wolf, every dream you had about changing the world. And when I am done, Silver Hollow will be a cautionary tale about what happens to wolves who forget their place." Celine met his eyes. "Is that supposed to scare me?" "It is supposed to be the truth," Gareth said. Then he gestured, and his wolves surged forward. The fighting was brutal, close-quarter savagery where skill mattered less than endurance. Celine lost herself in the rhythm of survival. Block, strike, move, kill. Do not think about the wolves falling around her. Do not think about the fact that they were losing. Just survive. She saw Kyle go down, his leg finally giving out. Saw Imara fighting back-to-back with 2 other wolves, their shields cracking under the assault. Saw Rowan carving through enemies with mechanical precision, his face blank with the kind of focus that came from years of practice. And then she saw the betrayal. One of her own wolves, a beta named Marcus, who had joined them 6 months ago, stepped back from the line and lowered his weapon. Then he turned and drove his blade into the back of the wolf beside him. The world stopped. Celine watched, frozen in disbelief, as Marcus ripped his blade free and shouted something to Gareth's wolves. Watched as 3 more of her fighters dropped their weapons and turned on their packmates. Traitors. They had been planted. Sleeper agents waiting for exactly this moment. And just like that, the inner courtyard descended into chaos. Silver Hollow's wolves did not know who to trust anymore. They turned on each other, suspicion and fear replacing the unity that had kept them alive this long. Gareth's army pressed the advantage, driving into the gaps opened by betrayal. Celine felt something inside her crack. This was how it ended. Not with a heroic last stand, not with defiance and courage. With wolves she had trusted putting knives in the backs of wolves she had promised to protect. She had built a kingdom on the idea that loyalty could be chosen, that wolves did not need fear and domination to stand together. And it had failed. Marcus caught her eye across the chaos. He was smiling. "Gareth pays better," he shouted, "and he does not pretend power is anything other than what it is." Then Rowan was there, his sword taking Marcus's head off in a single clean stroke. The body hit the ground and Rowan turned to Celine, his face spattered with blood. "We have to go," he said. "Now. This is over." "No," Celine said. Her voice was hollow, empty. "We do not run." "We do not have a choice," Rowan snarled. "Look around, Celine. We are surrounded, outnumbered, and our own wolves are turning on us. If we stay, we die. If we die, Silver Hollow dies with us." "Is that what you want?" Celine looked at him, at the faces of the wolves still fighting, still bleeding, still believing that she could save them. And she made the hardest choice of her life. "Fall back to the northern passage," she said. The words felt like glass in her throat. "Everyone who can move, fall back. Now." The order rippled through the remaining wolves. They disengaged and ran, carrying their wounded, abandoning the courtyard they had bled to defend. Celine was the last to leave. She stood at the entrance to the passage, watching Gareth's wolves flood into the space she had called home for 3 years, watching them tear down the walls she had built, watching her kingdom burn. Gareth appeared in the courtyard, his eyes finding hers across the distance. He raised a hand in mock salute. Then Rowan grabbed her arm and pulled her into the darkness, and Silver Hollow fell. They ran through the night. The northern passage was a narrow tunnel that led out of the valley, known only to Silver Hollow's inner circle. It was meant for emergencies, for the kind of catastrophic failure no one wanted to admit was possible. 53 wolves made it through, out of 300. They emerged into the wilderness just as dawn broke, exhausted and broken and barely alive. Celine collapsed against a tree and tried to breathe through the crushing weight of what had just happened. She had lost everything, the kingdom, the wolves who had trusted her, the dream that a better world was possible, and the worst part was knowing that she had brought it on herself. By attacking Gareth, by believing Rowan when he said they needed to strike first, by compromising everything she stood for in the name of survival. Cale limped over and sat down beside her. His leg was a ruin, barely functional. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly. Celine did not have an answer. She looked at the wolves scattered around her, Amara, sitting with her head in her hands, Rowan, staring back toward the valley with an expression carved from stone. The survivors, too shocked and traumatized to do anything but breathe. These were all that remained of Silver Hollow, 53 wolves and a wound that would never fully heal. Rowan walked over and crouched in front of her. "I know what you are thinking," he said quietly, "that this is your fault, that you should have stayed true to your principles instead of listening to me. But Celine, if you had not attacked Gareth, he would have attacked you. Maybe not today, maybe not this month, but eventually, and you would have been even less prepared." "That does not make it better," Celine said. Her voice was raw, barely above a whisper. "I told them they were safe. Told them Silver Hollow was different, that we did not rule through fear or conquest, and then I sent them to war and got them killed." "You gave them a choice," Rowan said, "same as you always did. They chose to fight, chose to defend what you built. That is not on you." Celine looked at him, at the man who had lived with these choices for decades and still somehow found the strength to keep going. "How do I come back from this?" she asked. Rowan's expression was infinitely sad. "You do not come back," he said. "You move forward. You take the wolves who survived and you build something new, something stronger. You learn from the mistakes and you make damn sure they do not happen again. And if I cannot, if I am not strong enough, then you fake it," Rowan said. "Because those wolves," he gestured to the survivors, "they need you to be strong enough, even if you are not, especially if you are not." Celine closed her eyes. She could still smell the smoke, Still hear the screams, still see Marcus's smile as he drove a blade into his packmate's back. She had built a kingdom on the belief that wolves could choose loyalty. That power did not have to mean domination, and she had been wrong, not about the dream, but about how fragile it was, how easily it could be shattered by wolves who wanted the old ways to survive. When she opened her eyes again, something had shifted inside her. The Celine who had walked out of Rowan's palace 3 years ago would have refused to compromise, would have held to her principles even if it meant watching everything burn. But that Celine had died in Silver Hollow's courtyard, bleeding out alongside the wolves she had failed to protect. What remained was something harder, colder, a wolf who understood that survival meant adapting, meant becoming whatever you needed to be to keep your pack alive, even if it meant becoming the very thing you had sworn never to become. She stood. Her legs shook, but they held. "Gather everyone," she said. Her voice was steady, empty of everything except will. "We move in 1 hour. No fires, no noise. We put distance between us and Gareth before he realizes we are not all dead." "Where are we going?" Aymar asked. "East," Celine said. "To the territories Rowan told us about, the ones on the edge of coalition control. We're going to do what we should have done from the start." "What is that?" Kale asked. "Stop pretending we can win by being better than them," Celine said, "and start winning by being smarter, more ruthless, more willing to do what they will not expect." She looked at each of them in turn, at the wolves who had followed her into hell and somehow made it out the other side. "Silver Hollow is gone," she said, "but we are not. And before this is over, Gareth and every other alpha who thinks they can crush wolves who choose freedom is going to learn what it costs to make that mistake." Her voice was ice. Her eyes were iron. And for the first time since the battle, Rowan smiled, because he recognized what he was seeing, the birth of something he had watched destroy kingdoms before. A wolf who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. They moved like ghosts through territories that did not want them. 53 wolves with nothing but the weapons on their backs and the fury in their chests. They avoided roads, stuck to the deep forest where coalition patrols rarely ventured, and survived on whatever they could hunt or steal. Every day was a test of how far desperation could carry you before it broke your spine. Celine led them east, just as she had promised, but the wolf leading them now was not the same one who had built Silver Hollow. That wolf had believed in sanctuary, in giving broken wolves a place to heal. This one understood that healing was a luxury you earned after you won, not before. They reached the first territory after 6 days of hard travel. It was a small pack, maybe 80 wolves, led by an alpha named Corvin, who ruled through a combination of tradition and casual brutality. His wolves were lean, underfed. Their eyes tracked Celine's group with the wary hunger of animals who had learned not to trust anything that looked like opportunity. Celine walked into Corvin's camp alone. He met her in a clearing that served as his throne room, a space ringed by wolves who looked ready to kill on command. Corvin himself was older than she expected, gray creeping through his fur, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. "I know who you are," he said. "The Luna who walked away, the one who built that sanctuary in the north and got it burned to ash. Why would I let you anywhere near my territory?" "Because your wolves are starving," Celine said. She kept her voice flat, factual. "Because the coalition demands tribute you cannot afford and offers nothing in return. Because half your pack would leave tomorrow if they had somewhere to go." Corvin's lip curled. "Careful, Luna. You are in my territory, on my sufferance." "I am stating facts," Celine said. "And here's another one. Gareth just proved that building a sanctuary is not enough. The coalition will not allow wolves to choose freedom. They will burn it down and salt the earth. So if you want to survive, you need allies, real ones. Wolves who will stand with you when the coalition comes calling." "And you think that is you?" Corvin asked. "You and your 50 broken refugees?" "No," Celine said. "I think it is every wolf who is tired of bleeding for alphas who see them as disposable. Your pack, the territories to the south, the coastal packs who lose half their young to coalition wars. All of us together." Corvin studied her for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a harsh sound, bitter. "You want to build an army," he said. "Another pretty alliance that will fall apart the moment things get hard." "I want to build a weapon," Celine corrected, one pointed directly at the coalition's throat. "And I want your wolves to help me sharpen it. The clearing went silent. Corvin leaned forward. "And what do I get in return for gambling my pack on your revenge?" "Survival," Celine said. "When the coalition comes for you, and they will, you will have backup. Real backup. Not promises, not treaties. Just wolves who understand that we either stand together or we die alone." Corvin was quiet for a long time. His wolves watched, waiting for his judgment. Then he nodded slowly. "1 month," he said. "You have 1 month to prove you can deliver what you are selling. If you cannot, you leave my territory and you do not come back." "Deal," Celine said. She turned and walked out of the clearing, feeling Corvin's eyes on her back the entire way. When she reached the tree line where her wolves waited, Kael was there with his arms crossed. "He agreed?" he asked. "For now," Celine said. "Now we have to make sure we do not waste it." Mom. The next 3 weeks were a blur of movement and manipulation. Celine sent scouts to every struggling pack within 100 miles, offered the same deal she had given Corvin. "Join us or watch the coalition bleed you dry." Some refused, some attacked the scouts on sight, but some listened. A pack to the south led by a female alpha who had lost 2 sons to coalition wars. A coastal territory whose fishing grounds had been seized by a neighboring kingdom. A group of exiles who had been surviving in the Badlands for years, waiting for someone to give them a reason to fight. One by one, they came. Not because they trusted Celine, because they had nowhere else to turn. Rowan worked beside her, using his knowledge of coalition politics to identify weak points. Territories where resentment ran deep. Alphas who had barely survived the last purge and knew another was coming. He moved through the shadows of the eastern territories like a man who had spent his life learning how power really worked, and Celine hated how much she relied on that knowledge. But she needed every advantage she could get. By the end of the 3rd week, they had assembled something that almost looked like an army. 300 wolves from 7 different territories, all united by the understanding that the coalition would crush them individually, but might hesitate against a unified force. It was fragile, built on desperation and shared enemies rather than trust. But it was something. Celine stood on a ridge overlooking the camp they had established in neutral territory, watching her new alliance train together. Corvin's wolves fought alongside the coastal pack. The exiles from the Badlands taught Silver Hollow's survivors how to move through terrain that would kill softer wolves. It looked like hope. It felt like a knife waiting to slip between her ribs. Rowan appeared beside her, his presence solid and steady in a way that made something in her chest ache. "You are building something dangerous," he said quietly. "I know. The coalition is going to see this as a declaration of war." "Good," Celine said. "Let them see it coming. Let them know that every wolf they pushed aside is coming back with teeth." Rowan turned to look at her. His expression was complicated, proud and worried, and something else she could not name. "You have changed," he said. "I had to," Celine replied. "The wolf who built Silver Hollow believed the world would let her create something better if she just tried hard enough. She was wrong. So now I am the wolf who understands that change does not come from asking nicely. It comes from making the old order too terrified to stand in your way." "That is a dangerous path," Rowan said. "So is lying down and dying," Celine shot back. "I tried peace, tried building something beautiful and watching it burn. Now I'm going to try fire. And if that makes me a monster, then I will be the kind of monster the coalition wishes they had killed when they had the chance." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was a terrible thing, sharp and proud and absolutely sincere. "Then let me help you burn it all down," he said. Botch. The coalition's response came faster than Celine expected. A messenger arrived under a white flag, carrying a sealed letter from the Council of Alphas. The same council that had demanded Celine share Rowan. The same council that had backed Gareth's assault on Silver Hollow. Celine broke the seal and read the message aloud to her assembled commanders. To the wolf called Celine Ashridge. "You have been declared an enemy of the established order. Your alliance of rogue territories is an act of sedition against lawful authority. Disband immediately and submit to judgment, or face annihilation. You have 3 days." She finished reading and looked up. Every face in the tent was watching her. 3 days, Kael said. "That is not enough time to fortify. Not enough time to prepare." "They do not want us to prepare," Rowan said. "They want us panicking, making mistakes." "Then we do not panic," Celine said. She folded the letter and dropped it on the table. We do exactly what they do not expect. Which is? Corvin asked. We attack first, Celine said. The tent erupted in argument, wolves shouting over each other, some demanding they flee, others insisting they dig in and defend. Celine let them argue for exactly 10 seconds before slamming her fist on the table hard enough to crack wood. The room went silent. Listen to me, she said. Her voice was cold. Absolute. The coalition expects us to scatter or turtle up. They expect fear. So we give them the opposite. We hit their supply lines, burn their forward camps, make them bleed before they even reach our position. And when they do come, they come tired and angry and off balance. That is suicide, one of the coastal alphas said. So is waiting for them to choose the battlefield, Celine shot back. At least this way we control the opening moves. She looked around this table, at wolves who had gambled everything on the belief that she knew what she was doing. I am not going to lie to you, she said. Some of us are going to die, maybe all of us. But if we are going down, we are taking as many of them with us as we can. And we are making damn sure every wolf in the coalition wakes up tomorrow knowing that pushing us was the worst mistake they ever made. The silence stretched. Then Amara stood. I am in. Kael nodded. So am I. One by one, the other commanders agreed. Not because they believed they would win, because they understood that running was just another way of dying, and at least this way they got to choose how. Celine allowed herself one moment of relief. Then she buried it under the weight of what came next. We move at nightfall, she said. 3 strike teams. Rowan, you take the western approach. Burn their supply depot. Imara, you hit the eastern camp. Kill anyone who tries to flee. Kael, you are with me. We are going straight for their command structure. Understood, they said in unison. The meeting broke. Wolves filed out to prepare for what might be their last night alive. Rowan lingered. When the tent was empty, he moved to stand in front of Celine, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him, could smell the familiar scent that still made her wolf whine with confused longing. If this goes badly, he said quietly, I want you to know something. Celine waited. I have made a lot of mistakes in my life, he said, but walking away from you when you needed me to stand beside you was the worst. And everything I have done since, every choice I have made has been about trying to earn back what I threw away. Not your forgiveness, just the right to stand beside you again. Celine stared at him. At the man who had been a king and gave it up because he finally understood what mattered. You already stand beside me, she said quietly. Have been for weeks. That is not the problem. Then what is? Rowan asked. I am terrified, Celine said. The admission came out raw. Honest in a way she had not allowed herself to be since Silver Hollow fell. I am terrified that I'm leading these wolves to their deaths, that I have become exactly the kind of alpha I swore I would never be, that the only difference between me and the coalition is which direction the knife points. You are not them, Rowan said. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he cupped her face in his hands. You are fighting to give wolves a choice. They fight to take that choice away. That distinction is everything. Is it? Celine asked. Because I am still sending wolves to kill and die for my vision of how the world should be. Yes, Rowan said. But your vision gives them agency, gives them the chance to build something better if they survive. That is not tyranny, Celine. That is leadership. And it is terrifying and brutal and unfair, but it is also necessary. Celine closed her eyes, felt the weight of his hands on her face, felt the mate bond that had never quite broken pulse with something that might have been hope or might have been grief. If we survive this, she said, if we actually pull this off, we are going to have a very long conversation about what comes next. I look forward to it, Rowan said. Then he leaned in and kissed her. It was not gentle, not soft or tentative. It was the kiss of 2 wolves who had survived hell and found each other on the other side, desperate and fierce, and absolutely certain that this might be their last chance. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Do not die, Celine said. Same to you, Rowan replied. Then he turned and walked out of the tent, leaving Celine alone with the taste of him on her lips, and the knowledge that in a few hours she would either change the world or die trying. The strike teams moved out at midnight, Celine led her group of 20 wolves through terrain that would have killed anyone who did not know the land. They moved fast and silent, years of survival training making them invisible even under a moon bright enough to read by. The coalition's command camp was fortified but not impregnable. They had numbers and confidence. What they did not have was the expectation that anyone would be stupid enough to attack them directly. Celine proved them wrong. Her team hit the camp from 3 sides simultaneously, fire and steel turning the night into chaos. Tents went up in flames. Wolves died screaming. The carefully ordered military structure dissolved into panic as warriors scrambled to understand what was happening. Celine carved through the confusion like a blade through flesh. She had one target, the Alpha, commanding this force. A wolf named Thane, who had personally ordered the destruction of 2 territories that refused coalition rule. She found him trying to rally his guards near the command tent. Their eyes met across the firelight. Thane shifted immediately, his wolf form massive and scarred. He lunged without warning, claws extended, jaws wide enough to take her head off. Celine went low, rolled under his strike, and came up with her blade opening his belly. He howled and spun, faster than something that large should move. His claws caught her across the ribs, tearing through leather and skin. Pain exploded through her side, but she used the momentum to drive her second blade into his throat. Thane's eyes went wide, shocked, like he could not believe a wolf he had dismissed as a rogue had just killed him. Then he collapsed, and Celine was already moving. The camp was chaos. Her wolves fought with the desperation of animals who knew retreat meant death. The coalition forces outnumbered them 3-1, but they were disorganized, terrified, unable to mount an effective defense. "Fall back," Celine roared. The command cut through the noise. "We are done here." Her team disengaged and melted into the darkness, leaving behind a camp in ruins and a body count that would make the coalition think twice about underestimating them again. They regrouped at the rally point an hour later. Rowan's team arrived first, covered in soot and blood, but intact. Amara's group came in last, missing 2 wolves but carrying enough stolen weapons to arm their entire force twice over. Kale limped up to Celine, his face grim. "Casualties?" she asked. 7 dead, he said, 12 wounded. But we did it. All 3 targets destroyed. Celine nodded. The numbers felt like lead in her chest. 7 wolves who had trusted her. 7 families that would never be whole again. But the alternative had been worse. She looked at her assembled force, at wolves who had just proven they could fight coalition regulars and win. "You did well," she said. "All of you. Tonight we showed the coalition that we are not prey. We are not rogues begging for scraps. We are wolves who will burn their world down before we let them cage us again." The wolves howled. Not with triumph, with the kind of grim satisfaction that came from surviving something that should have killed you. Rowan moved to stand beside her as the celebration died down. "They will come for us now," he said quietly. "Everything they have. No more warnings, no more chances to surrender." "I know," Celine said. "Are we ready?" "No," she said honestly, "but we are going to fight anyway." The coalition army arrived 2 days later, and it was everything the scouts had warned about and worse. 1,500 wolves, professional soldiers backed by siege weapons and war machines, 3 separate Alpha commanders leading contingents from their respective territories. This was not a raid or a skirmish. This was an extermination force. Celine stood on the ridge above her camp and watched them come, her 300 wolves against 1,500. The math was brutal, but math had never been the point. She had chosen this ground carefully. A narrow valley with steep sides that negated numerical advantage. Choke points where a small force could hold against overwhelming numbers. Terrain that rewarded strategy over brute strength. It was the same valley where she had first met Kael and Amara, years ago when Silver Hollow was just a dream, full circle. Her commanders gathered behind her. Corvin, the coastal alpha whose name was Marin, the leader of the Badlands exiles, a scarred female called simply Ghost. Amara, Kael, and Rowan, standing slightly apart but present. "This is it," Celine said. "Everything we have been building toward. They are coming to crush us, to make an example, to prove that the old order cannot be challenged." She turned to face them. "But they are wrong," she continued, "because we are not just wolves anymore. We are a statement, Proof that loyalty does not require submission, that strength comes from choice, not coercion. And when this is over, when the dust settles and the bodies are counted, every wolf in the coalition territories is going to know our names. What if we lose? Ghost asked. Her voice was flat. Practical. Then we lose having proven that we were willing to die for something that mattered, Celine said. And that will inspire more wolves than 100 safe compromises ever could. The commanders nodded, understanding that this was bigger than survival now. This was about legacy. Positions, Celine said, and may whatever gods still listen have mercy on us all. They dispersed to their units. Rowan stayed. He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. Pride and sorrow and love all tangled together. I wish we had more time, he said. So do I, Celine replied. But time was a luxury neither of them had ever really possessed. The coalition horn sounded, deep and resonant, the sound of inevitability. Celine shifted. Her wolf form erupted from her skin, silver white and larger than it had any right to be. Around her 300 wolves shifted in response, their combined howls shaking the valley walls. And then the coalition army charged. They poured into the valley like a flood, armor glinting in the afternoon sun, weapons raised, voices raised in war cries that spoke of absolute confidence. Celine waited until they reached the first kill zone. Then she gave the signal. Hidden archers rose from concealed positions and loosed a storm of arrows into the packed ranks. Wolves screamed and fell. The charge faltered. Rock slides triggered by concealed ropes came crashing down from both sides of the valley, crushing dozens and blocking retreat. And then Celine's wolves hit them from the flanks. The battle was immediate brutality. No room for tactics or grand strategy, just wolves tearing into each other with everything they had, fighting for inches of blood-soaked ground. Celine fought in the center of the storm, her claws and teeth finding flesh, her body moving on pure instinct honed by years of survival. She killed an alpha twice her size by ripping his throat out while he was focused on another target, killed a beta by breaking his spine with her jaws. Killed and killed and killed until the world was nothing but blood and screaming and the wet sound of bodies hitting stone. Somewhere in the chaos, she saw Rowan fighting like something carved from violence itself. Saw Imara holding a choke point with 10 wolves against 50. Saw Kael, his ruined leg finally giving out, still fighting from the ground with a savagery that came from refusing to die quietly. The coalition kept coming. For every wolf they killed, 2 more appeared. The numerical advantage was too much, too overwhelming. Celine's force was being pushed back, slowly, inevitably. This was how it ended. Not with a miracle. Not with a dramatic reversal. Just with mathematics and exhaustion grinding them down until nothing remained. And then the western ridge erupted with howls. Celine's head snapped up, shocked, as hundreds of wolves poured over the ridgeline. Wolves she did not recognize. Wolves from territories she had never contacted. They slammed into the coalition's flank with fresh fury, and suddenly the impossible became possible. The tide turned. Coalition wolves, already exhausted from fighting uphill against prepared defenses, broke under the unexpected assault. Their formation shattered. Their confidence cracked. And Celine's wolves, sensing the shift, pushed forward with renewed desperation. The battle became a rout. Coalition soldiers fled back down the valley, abandoning their wounded, their siege weapons, their carefully maintained discipline. The 3 Alpha commanders tried to rally them, but it was too late. Fear had taken hold. And fear, once it started, was impossible to stop. By the time the sun touched the western horizon, the coalition army was in full retreat. Celine stood in the center of the battlefield, panting, covered in blood that was not all hers, and tried to process what had just happened. They had won. Against impossible odds, against every expectation, they had won. A wolf approached from the western ridge, an older male with grizzled fur and eyes that had seen too much. He shifted to human form and inclined his head. "Celine Ashridge," he said. His voice was rough with age and smoke. "I am Aldrich. I lead the mountain territories. We have been watching your rebellion from a distance, debating whether it was courage or madness." "And?" Celine asked, still too shocked to process. "We decided it was both," Aldrich said, "and that we were tired of watching brave wolves die alone. So we came." Celine stared at him, at the hundreds of wolves behind him, reinforcements she had never expected, had never even hoped for. "Why?" she asked. "Because you reminded us what it means to fight for something that matters," Aldrich said. "Because the coalition has been bleeding us dry for decades, and we finally found someone willing to stand against them. Because your silver hollow may have fallen, but the idea behind it did not." He stepped forward and extended his hand. "So if you are still building that weapon you talked about," he said, "we would like to help you sharpen it." Celine looked at his hand, at the face of a wolf who had just saved her life and the lives of every wolf who had trusted her. Then she clasped his forearm in the warrior's grip. "Welcome to the Alliance," she said. Behind her, her wolves howled, victory and relief, and the knowledge that they had just changed everything. Rowan appeared at her side, bloodied but alive. He looked at the mountain wolves, at Aldrich, at the battlefield littered with coalition dead. "This is not over," he said quietly. "No," Celine agreed. "This is just the beginning, because the coalition would not accept this defeat, would not allow their authority to be challenged and their armies humiliated. They would come back, stronger, angrier, with everything they had, but when they did, Celine would be ready. She had an army now, real allies, wolves who had proven they would bleed beside her, and she had finally learned the lesson that Silver Hollow's ashes had taught her. That changing the world did not mean being better than your enemies. It meant being willing to do whatever it took to survive long enough to build something better, even if that meant becoming the monster they feared most. Celine looked out across the valley, at her wolves tending their wounded, at the new allies standing shoulder to shoulder with wolves they had just met, at Rowan watching her with an expression that said he finally saw what she had become and loved her anyway. "The coalition thinks this was their worst nightmare," she said quietly. "They have no idea what is coming." Rowan smiled. It was sharp and dangerous and absolutely sincere. "Then let us show them," he said. And in the distance, beyond the ridge where the sun was setting in shades of blood and gold, the Coalition Council convened an emergency session, because for the first time in living memory, they were afraid. And Celine Ashridge, the Luna who walked away, was just getting started. The Coalition Council met in an ancient hall carved from mountain stone, where generations of alphas had gathered to decide the fate of territories and bloodlines. Tonight, the air tasted like ash and failure. 13 alphas sat around a table made from a single piece of obsidian, their faces illuminated by torches that cast shadows long enough to hide secrets. These were the wolves who had ruled the continent for decades, who had built their power on tradition and fear and the absolute certainty that their authority could never be challenged. That certainty had died in the valley 2 days ago. The eldest among them, a wolf named Cassius, whose scars predated most living memories, slammed his fist on the table hard enough to crack stone. 1,500 soldiers, he snarled, 3 alpha commanders, the finest warriors from 6 territories, and they were routed by a pack of refugees led by a Luna who walked away from her mate. "She is more than that now," another alpha said quietly. Her name was Elena, and she led the southern territories with a combination of strategy and ruthlessness that had kept her alive through 3 purges. Celine Ashridge has become what we feared most, a symbol. Proof that our way is not the only way. "Then we destroy the symbol," Cassius said. "Burn every territory that supports her. Execute every wolf who speaks her name. Make an example so brutal that no one ever questions us again." "And when that creates 10 more rebellions?" Elena asked. "When every territory that has ever resented our rule sees us slaughtering wolves for the crime of wanting choice? What then?" The room fell silent, because they all knew the answer. The old order was cracking. Not breaking yet, but showing fractures that could not be ignored. A younger alpha, one who had inherited his position rather than earning it through blood, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we negotiate," he said carefully. "Offer terms, acknowledge their grievances, and—" He never finished the sentence. Cassius moved faster than something his age should move, crossing the table and driving a blade through the young alpha's throat before anyone could react. The body hit the floor, blood pooled on ancient stone. "There will be no negotiation," Cassius said. His voice was ice. "Final. We rule or we die. Those are the only options the world has ever offered, and anyone who thinks otherwise is a fool." He looked around the table, daring anyone to challenge him. No one did. But Elena's eyes held something that might have been calculation or might have been the first seed of doubt taking root where absolute certainty used to live. Because she understood what Cassius refused to see, that the world was changing, that wolves like Celine Ashridge were not aberrations to be crushed, but harbingers of something inevitable. And the harder the coalition tried to hold on to the old ways, the more they guaranteed their own destruction. Celine stood in what remained of the battlefield and tried to reconcile victory with the cost. They had lost 93 wolves, 93 names she would carry for the rest of her life. Some had been with her since Silver Hollow. Others had joined just days before, gambling on a dream they barely understood. All of them were gone now. She walked among the cairns they had built on the ridge, each one marking a wolf who had chosen to stand when retreat was safer. The survivors worked in silence, stacking stones with the kind of reverence that came from knowing they could have easily been the ones beneath. Kyle found her standing before a cairn that marked 3 of her original pack, wolves who had followed her out of Rowan's kingdom and never looked back. "We should be celebrating," he said quietly. "We won." "Did we?" Celine asked. She did not turn to look at him, just kept staring at the stones. "Or did we just survive long enough to bury more friends?" "Both can be true," Kyle said. He limped closer, favoring the leg that would never fully heal. "You gave these wolves something worth dying for. That is not nothing. It feels like nothing right now," Celine admitted. Kale was quiet for a moment. Then he placed a hand on her shoulder. "When I found you in the woods 3 years ago," he said, "you were just a Luna who walked away. Now you are the wolf who united 7 territories against an empire. You think those wolves died for nothing? They died proving that the coalition is not invincible, that their authority is not absolute, that change is possible even when it seems impossible." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "That legacy will outlive all of us," he said, "including you." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Celine alone with the dead and the weight of what came next. Because winning the battle had only bought them time. The coalition was already regrouping, already planning their next assault. And when they came back, they would come with everything they had. Celine could spend her life fighting that tide, could build an empire on the bodies of wolves who believed in her vision, could become exactly what Cassius feared most, or she could find another way. The gathering happened 3 weeks after the battle, in neutral territory chosen specifically because no alpha could claim advantage. Celine had sent invitations to every pack on the continent, coalition territories, independent wolves, even the rogues and exiles who had no formal allegiance to anyone. The message was simple: come hear what we are building, choose your path. But choose. She expected maybe 50 wolves to show. Over 300 arrived. They filled the valley like a living thing, representatives from territories that had spent decades at each other's throats now standing side by side because something fundamental had shifted. The old certainties were crumbling. The old fears were losing their power. And Celine Ashridge stood at the center of it all. She had not worn armor, had not brought weapons or warriors. Just herself and the wolves who had survived with her, standing together on ground that belonged to no one. Rowan stood beside her. Not behind, not in front. Beside. 2 wolves who had walked different paths and found each other at the intersection of everything that mattered. The gathered wolves fell silent as Celine stepped forward. "I did not call you here to demand submission," she said. Her voice carried across the valley without strain. "Did not call you here to build an empire or claim territory or force you to choose between old masters and new ones." She paused, letting the words settle. "I called you here to offer you something the coalition never has. A choice freely made. A chance to decide for yourselves what kind of world you want to live in." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Suspicion and hope tangled together. 3 years ago, Celine continued, I walked away from an Alpha King because he asked me to compromise my dignity for politics. I thought I was just refusing to be broken. I did not realize I was starting something bigger. She gestured to the wolves around her. Imara, Kale, the mountain wolves led by Aldrich, the coastal pack under Marin, the Badlands exiles. These wolves built something with me, she said. Not a kingdom, not an empire, a choice. A statement that said we do not have to accept the world as it is, that loyalty does not require submission, That strength comes from standing together by choice, not force. An alpha from the Southern Territories stepped forward, a wolf named Marcus, scarred and skeptical. "Pretty words," he said, "but words do not stop coalition armies. Words do not feed starving packs or defend borders. What are you really offering?" "Protection," Celine said. "Not through domination, through alliance. Every pack that joins us keeps its autonomy, makes its own laws, chooses its own leaders. But when the coalition comes for one of us, all of us respond. Not because we have to, because we choose to." "And if we refuse?" Marcus asked. "Then you refuse," Celine said simply. "We do not force anyone. We do not punish wolves for making different choices. That is the whole point. The coalition rules through fear. We build through freedom. And we trust that given the choice, most wolves will choose something better than what they have." The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. Then a voice came from the back of the crowd, one Celine had not expected. Elena, the Southern Alpha from the Coalition Council, stepped forward. Her presence sent a ripple of shock through the assembly. "I have spent 20 years enforcing coalition law," Elena said. Her voice was steady, tired. 20 years watching wolves die for traditions that benefit no one except the alphas who invented them. "I came here today to see if you were a threat or a prophet." She looked at Celine with eyes that had seen too much and carried too much weight. "I still do not know which you are," Elena said, "but I know the old ways are dying, and I would rather help build something new than spend my last years defending something rotten." She inclined her head. A gesture of respect, not submission. "The Southern Territories stand with you," she said. The valley erupted. Wolves howled. Not with the savage triumph of conquest, but with the stunned relief of animals who had been given permission to hope. One by one, other representatives stepped forward. Some from coalition territories, some from independent packs, some from wolves who had been exiled so long they had forgotten what belonging felt like. Not all of them joined. Some walked away, unwilling to gamble on a dream that might collapse. Celine did not stop them, because this only worked if it was chosen freely. By the time the sun touched the horizon, 42 territories had pledged to the alliance. 42 packs representing thousands of wolves, all united by the radical idea that they deserved agency over their own lives. It was not enough to topple the coalition, but it was enough to change everything. Cassius received word of the gathering the next day, and the rage that followed nearly destroyed the council chamber. He executed 3 messengers before the others stopped bringing him reports he did not want to hear. Spent hours pacing like a caged animal, his mind racing through strategies and contingencies, and the growing certainty that everything he had built was slipping through his claws. Elena had betrayed them. 42 territories had defected. The Southern Front was collapsing. And at the center of it all stood a Luna who had walked away from power and somehow built something stronger than any crown. He called an emergency session of the remaining council members. 7 alphas now, where 13 had sat just weeks before. The absences spoke louder than any accusation. "We go to war," Cassius said. "Total war. Every resource, every soldier. We crush this alliance before it can solidify." "With what army?" one of the alphas asked quietly. "Half our territories are in open rebellion. The other half are waiting to see which way the wind blows. If we attack now, we might push the undecided straight into Celine's arms." "Then what do you suggest?" Cassius snarled. "That we negotiate? That we acknowledge these traitors as equals?" "I suggest we accept that the world has changed," the Alpha said, "and that we either change with it or we die defending a system that no longer serves anyone." Cassius stared at him, at this wolf who had been loyal for decades and was now questioning the foundation of everything they had built. "Then perhaps you should join them," Cassius said quietly. The Alpha met his eyes without flinching. "Perhaps I should." He stood and walked out of the chamber. 2 others followed, and Cassius was left with the ruins of an empire that had seemed unshakable just months before, crumbling because one Luna had refused to compromise her dignity. Celine found Rowan standing alone on the ridge, where they had first watched the coalition army approach, back when victory seemed impossible and survival was measured in heartbeats. "You did it," he said, without turning. "Built something that cannot be taken by force or crushed by numbers. Something that exists in the space between wolves, in the choices they make." "We did it," Celine corrected. She moved to stand beside him. You could have stayed king, could have held on to power and let the old ways continue. But you walked away, made the same choice I did. That matters. Rowan turned to look at her. His expression was complicated, proud and sad and at peace in a way she had never seen before. I spent 10 years as Alpha King, he said, built armies, conquered territories, made alliances that were supposed to last generations. And I lost the only thing that ever really mattered because I was too afraid to choose it over duty. He reached out and took her hand. His fingers were rough with calluses and scars from weeks of fighting beside wolves who had once been strangers. But I understand now, he said, power is not what you hold. It is what you are willing to give up for something more important. And you taught me that. By walking away. By refusing to be broken. By building a kingdom on choice instead of fear. Celine felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, just opening. Like a door that had been locked for years finally giving way. I never stopped loving you, she said quietly, even when I hated what you asked me to do, even when I walked away. The bond never broke. It just changed into something I did not recognize. It changed into something stronger, Rowan said, because it stopped being about what tradition demanded and started being about what we chose. And that is worth more than any crown. He pulled the silver ring from his pocket, the same one she had placed on his throne 3 years ago, the one he had carried ever since, waiting for the moment when offering it would mean something more than politics. I'm not asking you to be my Luna, he said. I'm asking you to be my partner, my equal. Not because some council decided we should unite bloodlines, but because I choose you and you choose me. He held out the ring. Will you build this new world with me? He asked. Celine looked at the ring, at the symbol of everything she had walked away from, at the man who had finally learned the same lessons that had nearly destroyed her. And she made a choice. She took the ring, not to wear, but to hold between them like a promise. I will build it with you, she said, not as Luna and Alpha, as Celine and Rowan. Two wolves who learned that sometimes the only way to save what matters is to let go of everything else. Rowan smiled. It was the first genuinely happy expression she had seen on his face in years. Then he pulled her close and kissed her, and for the first time since she walked out of his palace, Celine felt the mate bond settle into something that felt like home. Not because she had returned to what she left behind, but because they had both walked different paths and arrived at the same place. The final confrontation came not with armies or violence, but with a single letter delivered to Cassius by a wolf who had once served in his personal guard. It was signed by 19 coalition alphas, nearly 2/3 of the remaining territories. The message was brief: resign or be removed. The old order is done. Accept it with dignity or be swept aside with the rest. Cassius read the letter 3 times. Then he burned it and walked out onto the balcony of his fortress, looking down at the territory he had ruled for 30 years. He could fight, could call in every remaining loyal wolf and make a last stand that would be remembered for generations, or he could walk away. In the end, the choice was easier than he expected, because he was old, tired, and he could see the truth that he had been denying for months. The world had changed, and he had not changed with it. He left that night. No ceremony, no final speech, just an old wolf walking into the wilderness with nothing but the memories of an empire that no longer existed. Some said he died alone in the mountains. Others claimed he found a small pack of exiles and lived out his days teaching young wolves about the old ways. Celine never looked for him, never cared what happened to the wolf who had tried to crush her dream, because she understood something fundamental about power that he never had, that holding on to it too tightly was the fastest way to lose it, and that real strength came from knowing when to let go. 6 months after the battle, Celine stood in the valley where Silver Hollow had once existed. They had rebuilt it, not as a kingdom or a fortress, but as a symbol, a place where any wolf could come seeking sanctuary, where loyalty was chosen, not commanded, where the mistakes of the past were acknowledged but not allowed to define the future. The new structure rose from the ashes of the old, built by wolves from 42 territories working side by side. It was beautiful, functional, a testament to what could be achieved when wolves chose cooperation over conquest. Amara found her standing before the memorial wall where they had carved the names of every wolf who had died fighting for this dream. You should be inside, Amara said. The council meeting starts in an hour. I know, Celine said. She traced her fingers over names she would carry forever. Just needed a moment. Imar stood beside her in comfortable silence. They had been through too much together for words to be necessary. Do you think it will last? Imar asked eventually. What we built? Or will it fall apart the moment we are gone? I do not know, Selene said honestly. Maybe it falls apart. Maybe some ambitious alpha decides freedom is too messy and tries to rebuild the old order. Maybe we made mistakes we cannot see yet. She turned to look at Imara. But it does not matter, she continued, because we proved it was possible. Proved that wolves can choose something better if given the chance. And that idea, once it exists, cannot be killed. Not really. It will survive in the wolves who remember, who tell the story, who look at what we built and decide to try again. That is a lot of faith to place in stories, Imara said. Stories are how we survive, Selene replied. How we pass down the lessons that keep us from making the same mistakes twice. The coalition ruled for generations because they controlled the story, told wolves that power required submission, that loyalty meant obedience. We just wrote a different story, one where choice matters more than tradition. And if no one believes it, then at least we tried, Selene said. At least we stood up and said this is wrong, and here is something better. That counts for something, even if it all falls apart tomorrow. Amar smiled. You have gotten philosophical in your old age. I have gotten tired, Selene corrected, but the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from building instead of destroying. They stood together for a few more minutes. Two wolves who had been thrown away by the world and refused to disappear, who had built kingdoms and lost them and built them again, who had learned that real strength was not in holding power but in knowing when to share it. Then they turned and walked toward the council chamber, where representatives from 42 territories waited to continue the work of building something that had never existed before, a world where wolves chose their own fate. That night, after the meetings and negotiations and endless compromises that came with trying to unite wolves who had spent lifetimes at each other's throats, Selene found Rowan waiting for her in the quarters they now shared. He had made tea, an absurd domestic gesture from a man who used to command armies. Rough day? He asked. Every day is rough, Selene said. She collapsed into a chair that had seen better days. Marin and Aldrich almost came to blows over fishing rights. The Eastern Territories want more representation on the council, and someone started a rumor that we are secretly planning to establish a monarchy. Are we? Rowan asked. There was humor in his voice. Not even a little bit, Selene said. I have had enough of crowns to last 3 lifetimes. Good, Rowan said. He handed her tea that was too hot and too strong and exactly what she needed. Because I walked away from that life and I have no interest in going back. They sat in comfortable silence, sipping tea and listening to the sounds of the rebuilt settlement beyond their walls. Wolves talking, laughing, living without the constant fear that had defined generations. Do you ever regret it? Selene asked quietly. Walking away from everything you were, everything you built. Every day, Rowan said. Then he smiled. And not at all. I spent 10 years holding on to power because I thought it was the only way to keep wolves safe. But I was wrong. Power does not keep wolves safe. Choice does. Agency does. The knowledge that they can walk away if something becomes unbearable. He reached over and took her hand. You taught me that, he said, by being brave enough to leave, by showing me that some things are more important than duty or tradition or the weight of crowns, and I will spend the rest of my life grateful that I finally learned that lesson before it was too late. Selene squeezed his hand. We still have a lot of work to do. A lot of mistakes to fix. A lot of wolves who still do not trust what we are building. I know, Rowan said, but we have time now. Time to build it right. Time to make sure that what we create is worth the price we paid for it. And if we fail? Then we fail having tried, Rowan said. Having proven that another way is possible, that has to count for something. Selene leaned back and closed her eyes, feeling the weight of everything she had carried for 3 years finally starting to ease. Not disappearing, just becoming manageable. Because she had not done it alone. She had Rowan, had Amara and Kael and Aldrich and Maran and dozens of other wolves who had chosen to stand with her when standing was terrifying. She had built not a kingdom, but a movement, not an empire, but an idea. And ideas, once they took root, were harder to kill than any army. 5 years later, a young wolf named Sarah walked into what had become known as the Free Territories, carrying nothing but a small pack and a determination that bordered on desperate. She had fled an abusive pack in the far north, had heard stories about a place where wolves could choose their own fate, where Luna Celine and Alpha Rowan had built something different. She did not know if the stories were true, did not know if she would find sanctuary or just another version of the same cruelty she was running from. But she had to try. The guards at the border did not stop her, did not demand submission or tribute, just asked her name and why she had come. "I need a place to start over," she said. The guard smiled. "Then you are in the right place." They took her to the central hall, where representatives from 63 territories now met to discuss policies and resolve disputes, and continue the messy work of building a world where choice mattered more than tradition. Celine was there, older now, gray creeping through her silver fur, but her eyes still held the same fierce determination that had carried her through 3 years of hell and into something better. She listened to Sarah's story without interruption. Then she placed a hand on the young wolf's shoulder. "You are safe here," Celine said. "No one will force you to return. No one will demand you explain yourself or justify your choice. You are free to stay or go as you please. That is the only law we enforce." Sarah felt something inside her break. Not in a bad way. Just releasing tension she had been holding so long she had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me," Celine said. "Thank every wolf who fought to make this place possible, who died proving that another way existed. Their sacrifice is why you get to choose your own path now." She squeezed Sarah's shoulder gently. "Welcome to the Free Territories," she said. "Welcome home." And Sarah understood then that the stories were true, that Celine Ashridge had walked away from power and built something more valuable than any crown, a place where broken wolves could heal, where choice was sacred, where the past did not define the future. It was not perfect. It was messy and complicated and constantly on the edge of falling apart. But it was real. And it was enough. Well, years later, when Celine was too old to fight and Rowan's hair had gone completely gray, they stood together on the ridge where they had first watched armies clash over competing visions of power. The Free Territories had grown. 87 packs now, thousands of wolves. A system of governance that was constantly evolving but built on the foundation that had survived every challenge. Choice, agency, the radical belief that wolves deserved to control their own lives. It had not been easy. There had been setbacks, betrayals, moments when the whole thing nearly collapsed. But it had survived, because the idea at its core was too powerful to die, too necessary, too aligned with something fundamental about what it meant to be alive. "Do you think we did enough?" Celine asked quietly. Rowan looked out at the territories spread below them, at the wolves living and working and choosing their own paths. "We did what we could," he said. "Built something better than what came before. Proved that power does not have to mean domination. That is more than most wolves ever accomplish." Celine leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of the mate bond that had survived everything the world threw at it. "I never stopped loving you," she said. "Even when I walked away, even when I hated what you represented. Some part of me always knew we would end up here." "Here is good," Rowan said. "Here is exactly where we were always supposed to be." They stood together as the sun set over the Free Territories. Two wolves who had walked different paths and found each other at the intersection of everything that mattered. And in the valley below, young wolves like Sarah were writing their own stories, making their own choices, building their own futures. Because Celine Ashridge had walked away from an alpha king and proved that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to compromise yourself for someone else's vision of power. That walking away is not weakness. It is the beginning of everything.